Not at all. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor.
Yeah,
Great to meet
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, great to meet you too. So before we get into the latest album, Voyages, I want to know. I know we're getting fatigued by talking about COVID, but it was such a big deal for all of us, especially for musicians.
Oh, yeah.
How did you make it through that time period, and how did it either influence Voyages or influence the way that you do things now?
Well, I think most of us would say it was a hard reset
Yeah.
on many levels. And Voyages, the project was actually underway before the pandemic. This was a result of a Chamber Music America grant. And we actually had our premiere literally, I think, the very last few days of 2019.
Yeah.
And and we'd scheduled to record it, of course, early 2020, and then everything got shut down. So I think the first thing was just, of course, loss, the loss of momentum, the loss of being able to play with each other, and of course, the tragic loss of life that certainly in New York City we were seeing a lot of. But then what I experienced, as I'm sure a lot of people did, was the regaining of a certain kind of balance to our lives, especially being able to spend more time with family, being able to just slow down and notice your environment. And that really had a big effect on my personal writing, being able to take in what was going on around us and sort of use that as an inspiration for writing new things. I did a lot of different projects during that time. I wrote a big band piece that I recorded remotely with a lot of my friends, which was a great way to sort of keep in touch with my community. I wrote an opera, a 10-minute opera, which was actually premiered remotely as well, which was very interesting. And I wrote some sort of, I guess, pieces, chamber music pieces that were inspired by wildlife around the neighborhood. I wrote a piece for solo flute that was based on a mockingbird song that I'd recorded just outside my window. And then 2 years later, we recorded this. We were finally able to get together and record this project that I'd done beforehand. I will say, this project is it's kind of a complex work. It's certainly the most complex thing that I've ever done, and it deals a lot with sort of my family roots. And digging deep into that, I'm a Japanese American, and my grandfather was an immigrant to this country. But during the pandemic, we had this other thing that kind of happened, where this ugliness of anti-Asian sentiment came out, kind of blaming the Asian American community for this pandemic, and it really kind of brought up a lot of sort of early childhood feelings that I had, being Asian and being in a kind of a hostile environment. This was really going back to like the 1970s, living in Boston at the time, and we were on the heels of the Vietnam War, so there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiment back then as well. And so it was really kind of it kind of made the project a little weightier for me, and a little more. It kind of changed my whole thought process in the release of the record.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way, the pandemic did affect the actual project in that way, the whole thematic message behind it.
So, what are you hoping the listener gets from this album? What's your hope?
Well, I mean, it is a very personal story, but I think it's also a story that can ring true to almost everybody. I mean, we all, what are our roots, you know? I mean, how many of us are there that can claim that we are truly American natives, right? So we've all come from somewhere. And at various times during the history of our country, our people, our tribe, if you want to call it that, were persecuted. And I mean, if you could go all the way back to the people who came over on the Mayflower, they came here because they were persecuted in their own country. So I'm hoping the listener, if they read the story behind the music, can relate to it that way. If you listen to the music and you don't know anything about the narrative, which is the way I listen to a lot of my music, I'm still hoping that the listener understands that there's a journey, that there's a storytelling, that there's a voyage. The name of the album is Voyages, to all the music. It's fairly complicated stuff, and a lot of thought went into how the journey starts and ends musically. It's a much different journey than, say, just playing a bunch of standards, and not. I mean, that could also be a journey of its own, but it's just a different kind of journey.
Yeah.
A lot of different twists and turns in the music. So I love storytelling, and I hope the listener gets some kind of sense that there's a story to be told and listened to.
So let me hone in on journey. Take me back to the beginnings of your life and how music became a refuge, became your passion, and even how you got into jazz and that became your career.
Well, my parents were, I would say, amateur musicians. They were never at any point professionals in their careers. My dad was a public defender. My mother was an emergency room nurse for a good part of her career. But they both loved the arts. My dad was a avid listener of music, and he had not a huge record collection, but a collection that he listened to repeatedly. So, especially classical music, he knew about sonata allegro form. He knew about really everything there was to know about the music that he was listening to. He was a deep listener, and I think I just assumed that everybody listened to music that way, which was certainly not the case. But I think I picked up sort of a deeper process of listening to music through just listening to music with my father. They played instruments. My dad played a little bit of guitar, not very well, but he was very earnest at it. And my mother played a little bit of piano. They both played recorders in wooden flutes in a amateur recorder quartet when we lived in, I think probably we were in Boston at that time. We moved around a lot. But I was always grabbing those instruments and just playing, the kind of songs that you learn as a kid, and I think that was just a natural evolution to joining band when I was a kid, and I certainly my parents were interested in getting us more socially included in a community, and for them, they saw the band. We would see the parades, and we would go out and hear them. And I think the wheels were turning in our head, like this might be a good way to get my kid into a social situation, because again, we'd moved around a lot, and I hadn't had that sort of just group of friends yet when we moved to Vermont, where we ended up settling. So I came home one day, and there was a clarinet on my bed, and I said, "What's this?" She's like, "Surprise, you're joining band." So that started the road to where I am now, I suppose. I had some really great teachers who loved teaching and loved music. And I think, if anything, it was just having some really great role models in my life as teachers back then who really loved music and loved what it provided the community. And this town that I grew up in, Vermont, was very small, this town of Brattleboro, Vermont. But we had, it was very rich in culture. And there was a little club there that was, didn't have a liquor license. So for kids, it was cool for us to show up and listen to live jazz. There were local jazz musicians that played at the club. But I think really for me, in high school, it was listening to my older peers play in the jazz band. And I'd been a classical clarinet player up to that time. It was really my ambition to play classical music in an orchestra or in a wind ensemble, or one of these big classical music ensembles. And then the first time I heard the jazz band play, it was like this explosion in my head went off, because I saw these kids taking risks in front of our peers, and that's something that I felt I wasn't getting playing clarinet in the concert band. And that sense of risk and spontaneity and just making stuff up on the spot. I mean, it was just like this excitement, this energy that I wanted to partake in. So I approached my band director. I said, "I want to play in the jazz band." And he said, "Well, that's awesome. You have to play saxophone then, because there's just no music for us to the arrangements don't allow for clarinet to be sole instrument." I think he was also kind of thinking outside the box, like, this kid's got a fire behind him. He's really good on the clarinet. Maybe we can open some doors this way. And so one thing led to the next, and then I was off to college as a saxophonist with that flame of risk and jazz and improvisation in my future. I just wanted to have every part of that in my musical life.
So but the beauty of the Japanese culture is there's always been this reverence for jazz. Just every time I talk to musicians that go to Japan, it's like there's rapt attention. They have Sharpies with old LPs. They just love it. So was that infused in you as a part of your background? Did you feel that kind of reverence and love for jazz always?
Yes, I mean, certainly there was a reverence for it in the music that I was listening to. I started. I think a lot of people come to jazz from whatever music they've been listening to at the time. Maybe it's pop music. Maybe they hear saxophone in some of the pop music they're listening to, and they want to get more into that. And through that, they discover, oh, wow, there's this lineage. My father, when he saw me practicing saxophone and really kind of just experimenting with the different sounds, and he brought home for my birthday a cassette tape of Coleman Hawkins and Ben Webster with Oscar Peterson and Joe Jones and I think Bud Johnson. I mean, just these classic saxophonists from kind of bridging the swing to bebop eras. And I listened to that recording. I mean, I could still sing back all the solos on that recording. I listened to it so much. Part of that was just, I didn't, it was a different time, a different way that we listened to music. I had enough money to buy maybe one record a year. And there was no streaming, there was the radio, and there was, cassette tapes that maybe you've duplicated somebody else's or taken off of, or LPs, So I think just listening over and over again to these masters kind of developed a reverence for that music for me. There was just this sound, the sound of jazz. It's like now when you define the sound of jazz, it's almost impossible because it's so broad. Yeah. Back then, for me, the sound of jazz was that. It was totally out of the swing era, early bebop era, and of course, then I got into John Coltrane and that.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah, that shot me off in a whole nother pursuit. But as to your comment about the Japanese culture of doing that, we grew up. My family on the East Coast, and the rest of my Japanese clan, if you will, we're all on the West Coast. So I had very little contact with that part of my heritage until later in life, and then it became much more important for me as a Japanese American. Yeah.
So, what do you like the best about being a professional musician? We could go back to that word risk. There is something about being placed on the spot and having to channel your focus in the moment. That really, I haven't found it in any other part of my life. I mean, the intensity of focus and channeling everything that you've learned into the moment, and but also what's really important for me is community, and musicians are a special group of people. They're my favorite people in the world, and there's nothing like communicating through music with those people to just make you feel like you're really part of a special community. For me, it's all about community and sharing joy among your community, and the risk just makes it all that much more fun. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow, we just became a therapy session.
That's right. This is the therapy part.
That's a great question, and one that everybody should think about. I think for me, I'm a thoughtful person, and at times I feel like I overthink things, and I know that the way other people look at me is a little bit different, as it is, I'm sure, when I look at other musicians that I admire. I look at maybe their achievements, their accomplishments, and I think every musician deals with imposter syndrome in a different way, and I'm certainly no exception. But I think that I am somebody that people look at as, now this person's really thought through a lot of things. One thing I would like to try to do is maybe achieve a greater balance between that and being more spontaneous. I look at my son and I see myself reflected in him as somebody who's very thoughtful and at times an overthinker. And my wife, on the other hand, is like the most spontaneous person I've ever met on the planet. And I think just, our marriage is this balance of spontaneity and process. I'm somebody who I think over prepares for everything, because as much as I love the risk part, I can't tackle it unless I have the tools sharpened and ready to go. Yeah. So, my students, I look at them and I see, is this person like has this wonderful spontaneity, but they're not ready to take care of business yet. So I'm like, you have to, I love your energy, but you've got to, over practice this stuff so that, things don't throw you off. Or I have students who are just maybe stuck in a rut and they need to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
So
if anyone wants to see you live, pick up a copy of Voyages in the correct way, anything else in your world, where can they go?
Well, I would, first of all, direct them to bencono.com, which is sort of the command center for this project. And I'm trying to update it more and more frequently as we get closer to the release date of this record. We just had I guess you could call it a pre-release concert of this music a couple weeks ago, and which went really great, and we had a really great turnout for it. We also got a really nice multi-track recording and video from it, so I'm slowly putting some of those some of that documentation on our website. We have quite a bit of documentation of this group so far. We've had a number of opportunities to perform it. But it's just sort of like collating all that stuff is kind of time-consuming process. So bit by bit, I'm adding to that website. I'm working on booking some things for next year, 2025 and 26. But it's a sort of a large ensemble, so it's kind of tricky to booking that a group. Also, it's very acoustic, so trying to get a string quartet in a room that's that sounds nice for it is also tricky. As far as the next few months, I'm playing with some pretty interesting ensembles. I'm playing at Birdland towards the end of the month with this wonderful composer, Miki Miyajima, and another couple of concerts upstate New York. That's more of like a chamber music, improvising chamber music. There's a wonderful cellist, Eugene Friesen, that I'm playing with. Drew Gress, great bass player. Some members of the Paul Winter Consort, if that gives you any idea of what kind of music that will be. Sure. And also this next week, I'm playing with my friend Joe McCarthy and his New York Afro-Bop Coalition, which is really exciting and fun, big band with a lot of sort of Latin American musicians and kind of a Latin American take on. Later on, we'll be doing some versions of the Nutcracker suite, but with these Latin American dancers, which is pretty amazing. And then I'm starting this I do a lot of theater work. So I'm starting this production of Gypsy, which will feature Audra McDonald, the great Broadway singer, Tony Award winner. And that'll start on Broadway in November. So you won't necessarily see me in that, but you'll hear me from the pit.
Excellent.
So it's a busy couple months coming up, yeah.
Sounds like it. Ben, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with Voyages. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely.